Hi, thank you very much for having me today. And I'm going to talk about mindset matters and setting your compass for success. Why this subject? Well, for me, as an NLP trainer, this is really what it's all about. It's getting in charge of your mind. It's understanding how your mind works. And Simon talked a lot about this in his presentation. And by being able to take charge of our thoughts and know exactly what's going on in there, we can really control where we're going and make conscious decisions. And for me, it's also getting aware of the unconscious, because the unconscious is what we're operating from most of the time. You weren't aware of your breathing until I mentioned it just then. You're not aware of the weight of your feet on the floor until I mentioned it just then. And just as the same as that, you're not aware of most of the thoughts that are going on. So here we are in a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I kind of chose the metaphor of a ship for my introduction in a storm, not because I'm a sailor, but because there's so many different things that are involved in this. There's continuous change. Just like the sea, the wind is just changing all the time. And for many people, the compass has spun out of control. It's like a ship in a storm. And we need to be able to deal with this, not just to cope, but to actively deal with this. A lot of people are in fight, flight, and also, well, I counter the fact that they're not probably in fight because they can't do anything. They're not in flight because we can't go out. We're all in freeze. We're in a time where we're just sitting and waiting. And what we need to be able to do is get into flow. A bit like Simon said, that level of acceptance and being able to move forwards. So it's not the mountains ahead to climb, it's that little pebble in the shoe that will wear you down, said Muhammad Ali. And for me, that's quite important, is that we tend to really zone in on all the little different things that we can't do, as opposed to just relaxing our awareness and thinking about what we can do. So I'm going to share some what I believe are key strategies and attitudes that we need as leaders of ourselves and as leaders of our teams as well. So in my world, the personal is the professional and vice versa. So the more we are one person, we're completely congruent inside, the more effective we are, the more energy we have, and the easier our life and our work becomes. So one of the major things, the key things for me, is self-awareness. It's an understanding and a willingness to grow. And there are certain things that I think are fundamental to that. Our values and our beliefs. Beliefs are not based on fact. Simon alluded to this earlier on about all the misinformation that is going on, and we take those beliefs in, we take in the information that will fit our beliefs. Values are what motivate us. Do our values and beliefs serve us? Are we motivated by moving towards what we want or away from what we don't want? And these are key things to be really thinking about. It's all very well to be motivated by moving away from what you don't want, but the further you get away from that, the less your motivation will be. There's less oomph. So perhaps think about, what are your values and beliefs? Are they serving you? So yeah, it's the values and beliefs. Do they serve us? Are we moving away or towards them? The next one is emotional agility. Do we know where our emotions are coming from? Again, alluding back to the last presentation, is what are our thoughts? What feelings are they triggering? And it's the agility is about the ability to deal with those emotions. It's not about pushing them underneath the carpet. It's about being able to deal with them. And also being able to be aware in the moment to moment of what is triggering us, and being able to control our impulses. And this is especially important when we're dealing with other people. So noticing what triggers we have and perhaps working on what's underlying those triggers. What in our past may be affecting us, what limiting beliefs might we have that we perhaps need to deal with. And this is why I keep going back there, keep alluding to the unconscious mind, is because that is what we operate from most of the time. And that's why self-awareness work is so important. Then we need to look at what our strengths are and operate from those strengths and think about, do we have strengths in other areas of our life that we could transfer to the current situation that we're in, or working with our teams when they're working remotely. Our attitude, that's really, really important. Are we optimistic? It's not about having relentless positivity. It's about thinking this too will pass. And as Simon said, everything will be okay. That's also one of my favourite sayings, funnily enough. Do we have a problem-solving attitude? And are we operating from being present and in the now? Do we have gratitude? And I'll come back to that a bit later. And do we have a humility as well? We may know many things, but it's about that attitude of being open to learning, of finding those inspiring people, of finding the people who may challenge our beliefs as well. And the other thing I'd say really importantly is being able to be open to feedback. If you're working with a team, even though you're working remotely, it's about being really honest with yourself. Am I open to feedback from my team about how I'm operating currently? And acting on that feedback, as opposed to being defensive. It's really going away and thinking to yourself, okay, what do I take from this? What can I learn from what these people are saying to me? The next skill that I think is really useful is adaptability. So it's not the strongest that survives nor the most intelligent, it's the one that's most adaptable to change, that lives with the means available and works cooperatively against common threats. So some people have said this, attributed this quote to Charles Darwin. It's not, it's actually much later than that, by this guy, Leon C. Megginson, so I've checked it. But I like the quote. Adaptability is crucial. Because we live in such a complex world, the person with the most flexibility actually does control the system, because that person can change their behaviour, their thinking and their approach at any time, in any moment. So you need cognitive flexibility. And how do you get it? It's about learning to take a different perspective, learning to reframe, and having open-mindedness. Again, listening to other people, listening to other viewpoints. It's about checking your own assumptions and your own biases, and again, asking for feedback. I think a really important aspect of adaptability is being creative. And this is, again, important when you go out and you have fun and you do things that are totally unrelated to work, because that's when your best ideas can come. And that's when you can relax and you can be a better person, both in your family team and with your other team at work. It's also where you can experiment as well, because experimentation leads to new ideas. And this is when I was working with children, this is what we really, really encouraged. And what I observed in their behaviour is that if they had a really flexible environment, then they could experiment without us telling them what they needed to do. And that developed self-belief and self-efficacy. And it was, for me, creativity is massively important in terms of enabling us to ride storm and to find that way between the waves, that smooth path. And then we have critical thinking. The critical thinking part is, do we fact check? And again, being aware of our bias. There's so much information going around now, as Simon said, is that a lot of the time we're not necessarily checking it, we're just taking the parts that fit our current beliefs. I do believe that we do need to challenge our own personal beliefs. Sometimes we've got a lot of conflict inside. If something doesn't quite sit right, sometimes our heart says one thing, our head says something else. And I think in terms of development in ourselves, it's about getting that congruity. It's getting that alignment in ourselves and really, really doing that work and being brutally honest to think about how can we change our approach to be more adaptable. And rather than looking outside at what other people aren't doing, is looking to ourselves and think about what else can we be doing. And then I think that there's also risk taking is really important. Again, that goes back to the creativity and experimentation. So at the moment, I'm not suggesting you take massive risks or anything, but I am suggesting that perhaps you need to check in terms of your own business, if you've got a business that's been completely thrown up in the air because of the situation, is that you think about, is this the right business, or do I need to change it? Do I need to perhaps look, because when we come out of this situation, life is not going to be the same. So how can I make sure my business, if it's the right business for me, continues to the future? And also thinking about, is it right for you as a person yourself? Because you have to think about your own well-being, which we'll come to at the end. So it's related back to your vision. Does your vision fit to the current situation? Is it best for you and your family? Or do you need to take a risk and perhaps change it, rather than stick to what you've got and what you know, just because you're in a position of fear and freezing? I would underline all of this is give yourself a break, go through that change curve that a lot of people are going through, but recognize that you need to do something active and positive for your future and for the future of your team if you're working with them. Another thing I also think is important is if you're working with a team, is support them to be adaptable. Trust them that they will know what to do. The three most important things for most people at work are autonomy, mastery, and meaning. Also be aware that some people will be able to work in this situation much better than others. So you need some empathy and you need some understanding as well. You need to do this differently and approach it differently with different people. But some people will really, really love to have an extra level of responsibility. For me, it's about flattening the hierarchy, and I think this is a great opportunity where that can happen, to really flatten the hierarchy and bring some new kind of structure to business out at the end of this. So that's supporting others. Then another thing that I think is really, really important is communication. Communication is key. Communication is at the bottom of negotiation, influence, it's the heart of all of those, the heart of everything. Communication with yourself. What's the language you're using to yourself? What are your internal representations? And what I mean with that is, what are the pictures that you hold in your head about things? What are you anchored to? Simon talked about music. What are the things that you consume, that you pay attention to, that are going to affect how you feel inside? What are the things that you say in terms of how critical are you to yourself? Are you being nice to yourself? Are you being kind? Are you accepting the situation and recognizing that you may just need a little bit of time before you can move forward? So really, really pay attention to the language that you're listening, the language that you're saying to yourself, you're talking to yourself with. What about the communication with others? This is key when we're working remotely. Notice how other people are communicating. Notice whether they're feeling really fearful, really unsure. Listen to the specific words that they use. When we listen to the specific words and we use those words back to people, they know that they've been understood. Pick up on whether they're a visual communicator, whether they're an auditory communication, so they talk about how things sound, or visual when they talk about how they see things, or a kinesthetic communicator, how things feel to them, or whether they're more analytical, whether they talk about exploring things or sensing things. Really, really listen to the language that other people use, their key phrases. And then when you speak back to them, use exactly their words and the types of words that they use. And they will then understand, and they will know that you understand them. For me, I think there's so much misinformation happens because we talk our own language to other people. And as a leader, it is of huge importance to listen to the language that our teams use and be able to step into their world and then guide them out of it to feeling more confident if their language is really negative. But we've got to first step into their world to take them out of it. Otherwise, we're just butting our heads and we can't understand where they're coming from. Influencing. So if you use that sort of language, you will have much greater level of influence. But the other thing I wanted to mention with regards to that is the type of language that people use. So again, a lot of the times we use very vague language, and that's used on purpose if you listen to the news, because that means that we will fill in the gaps with our own interpretation. But it also means that a huge amount of misinformation can be created. So when you're talking to your teams and when you're talking to your family, is being really specific about what you want, being really, really clear and checking with them that they know what you're talking about, that they know what you're looking for. The other thing I'd say is contact people regularly. Don't overwhelm them. And if you have team meetings, really prepare and plan for them and expect other people to prepare and plan for them. Tell them that too. And have your meetings via Zoom so you can see that everyone's paying attention. But I think regular contact with teams is really, really important at this moment in time. So be a leader who influences, because people will then follow you. The last part I wanted to talk about that I think is key and really important, and Simon touched on it as well, is well-being. We cannot move out of this situation unless we look after our own well-being. And working at home, as Simon said, we can just end up working and working and working. Again, thinking allusion to music is, in Indian music, it's the gap between the notes that's the most important. So you can link that to, it's the gap between the time that we're working that is important. That's when we recover. That's when we get our best ideas. That's when we really, really enable ourselves to become great leaders. If we don't look after ourselves, we can't look after anybody else. So I'm going to talk about just a few key things quickly. Sleep, massively, massively important. If you can't get 7 or 8 hours a night, and then that could be to do with the fact that your mind is just worrying and worrying, then perhaps it's like looking at what is causing you anxiety and changing that thought pattern. I haven't got time to go into the details now. But when you don't sleep, you can't think, you can't process, your irritation is higher, and you have lower immunity. When you're asleep, in your REM sleep, all of your thoughts are being processed and laid down as memories. When you're in deep sleep, you just have your brain washed to take away all the amyloid plaques, which are the proteins that really need to be cleaned out every night. Exercise. Exercise is massively important. If you can't go out and exercise, move regularly. A short burst of exercise is really, really good for your brain. Steady exercise, long exercise is really good out in nature. When you exercise, you release brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What that basically is it's something that helps your brain cells grow, gives you endorphins, and it stimulates you something called the cerebellum, which is helpful for pattern learning. It increases your capacity for learning. Pressure and stress. Most people go around going, oh, I'm so stressed, without identifying what they are stressed about. Is it actually just external pressures? Talking about being stressed actually turns on the stress response. We need to kind of get clever about identifying what is pressure and what is actually stress. And if it's the stress, what can we do about it? How can we minimize it? It becomes a pattern. Mindfulness. Mindfulness, really important to live in the now. We spend a lot of time wondering about what's going on in the future, and we spend a lot of time in the past regretting other things. This is for me about getting present and letting go of what you can't control. If there's loads of uncertainty outside of us, we need to create massive certainty inside. And that's why I talked about the whole self-awareness work. It's about getting congruency. Listen to what's going on in your head. Feel what's going on in your body. Notice and act, not react. And I would say make connections with people outside. Be vulnerable. Be empathetic. Have compassion, so important at this moment in time. Be in the now, and that will give you the energy to be able to take action for tomorrow. Some people, all they can do is act one day at a time at the moment. And we need to be really flexible, as our plans are going to have to change and change again and change again. The last thing I would mention is gratitude. Gratitude has been proven to have a real effect on people's mental health and positive state. And I would say I do gratitude 3 things in the morning and 3 things at night. Some people, my clients, I suggest they put it in a jar because then they can look at it when they're feeling really down or they're having a tough time. The other thing I would say is you could do to your staff and your team is send them a gratitude letter. You can even send it by post. And what you can do is just 3 minutes each day, write 1 letter to a member of your team and be specific. Say what you noticed, say when they did this specific thing was really good or really helped you or supported the team, the behavior you observed, be specific, and then the impact that it had on you or the team. I think that'd be a really good way to support the team at times like this. So in conclusion, there are 4 areas that I think are key to be able to take control of your compass and get congruent inside. That's self-awareness, adaptability, communicating with yourself and others, and looking after your wellness. And I think the result of that will bring make sure that your reservoir of resilience is completely filled, and then you have the capacity to lead yourself and others to thrive. So I think that's about it. That's all I wanted to say. I hope I haven't overrun hugely, but I forgot to turn my camera on, my phone on.
That's all good. Thank you ever so much, Fenella. If anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A now. So from my perspective, if there was one thing that people could be doing around their well-being and mindfulness at the moment, what would your top tip be?
The one thing people could be doing, actually, my top tip would be to breathe and to be aware of their breathing. In that moment when they're feeling really out of control, it's a way of getting back into your body. I think it's essential for us to be able to get out of our head and into our body.
I think that's a really good tip. I actually attended I think it was called Breathworks class the other day and found it truly amazing. I actually ended up falling asleep through the session and waking up 2 hours later. So just while it was virtual and I wasn't being kicked out of a live session somewhere with lots of people. So thank you ever so much to my speakers today for their time. Fenella, just a reminder, where can people get hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
You can access me via LinkedIn. Fenella Hemus, or on my website www.abovebeyondcoaching.co.uk.
Fantastic. And Simon, if you're still there, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me at simontyler.com, and I've put a link out on your LinkedIn page for the article Food for Thought, which people want to consume it in written format and in podcast format. That's there as well. But at the simontyler.com, you can subscribe for simple notes as they arrive, and emit to the world.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you also to Computer World for sponsoring the Zoom account that allows to make this possible. And for those of you that are looking for a light bit of entertainment this afternoon, we're doing a virtual pub quiz, several rounds, general knowledge. You can follow the Computer World LinkedIn page. Come join us. Grab a beer, wine, glass of water, whatever works for you, and come and have a bit of light entertainment this afternoon. So thank you ever so much for everyone joining, and look forward to see you on next week's Working From Home talk. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.